Greetings and welcome to Fresh Green Blessings. I am Parson Michael, and you are at our Mindful Bible Study. Um, Sacred Ground, that's our community. We are a church and a Sangha. We are melding the beneficial teachings of Buddhism, Christianity, and Earth-centered spirituality, and it's great to be with you. Um, Thank you for taking the time, your valuable time, to spend a little bit of it here with us this afternoon. We're going to be studying, or I don't know if studying is the right word, reflecting on Psalm 124 and Mark chapter 2. And what we're doing here is, I think, fairly unique because we're bringing mindfulness to this work. But that's not all. We're also bringing other traditions. So we're taking from Judeo-Christian tradition, but we're also melding Mother Earth spirituality, teachings from Buddhism, and we're bringing it together prayerfully, meditatively, mindfully, to see what sacred value we can find in the text. And I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But as I said, mindfulness is a key element for us here. Well, I should announce too, those of you who maybe tried to tune in last week, apologies, we had technical difficulties. You might notice we're in a little different space here. We're actually in my bedroom here today, or our bedroom, and using a different, newer computer, hoping that will solve our problem. You are welcome to communicate with me or with us. Ollie will be tuning in as well via the live chat. It's nice to hear from you. Letting us know that people are out there. At the same time, please, if we don't always respond, or if we don't respond right away in terms of the chat, please appreciate any grace you show us, because we're trying to manage this, just one or two of us here, and sometimes it can be confusing, in terms of trying to attend to the camera, attend to the teachings, attend to the chats. I'm going to begin, as I typically do, with the mindfulness bell. This is a Tibetan singing bowl. And in a moment, I'm going to invite the bell to sound. And why do we do that? We do that as an invitation towards presence. Most of us are familiar with that word mindfulness. And that word was largely introduced to the West through the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who's been a primary teacher for me and for our community. And mindfulness is, to put it very simply, becoming absolutely present in this moment. Right here, right now. Letting go of the future, letting go of the past, and becoming completely aware of this moment. It's one of the simplest ideas, and at the same time, it can be quite a challenge to practice it. Sometimes we only get a glimpse of it. Sometimes we might feel like we're in that presence for a long while. So right now, I'm going to utilize this bell and invite you into that presence. Those of you who are regular listeners, I would guess you get tired of hearing me say this, but it's invite. Everything is an invitation. You are the listener. You choose to participate as much or as little as you want. We are not about dogmatics here. We are not about this is what you must do. Figure out what's right for you. If today you just want to sit back and kind of watch and check out what these guys are doing, perfectly fine. If you feel like, hey, I'm going to go all in, if they're doing this meditation, I'm going to do it with them, that's great too. So you decide. With that, here's the bell, and we're invited into enjoying the sound of the bell in this moment. From here, we're going to go into a little meditative prayer practice. And it's funny, thoughts come to me. I'm inviting this bell to sound, and I can see someone out there saying, well, okay, that's fine. That's a Buddhist thing, but I'm here for a Bible study. What's that have to do with what we're doing? When I was listening to that bell, memories, and this doesn't usually happen to me, but it happened today. Memories were coming back to me of Holy Trinity Roman Catholic Church up on the hill in Struthers, Ohio. And I could remember the bells during the Mass and just that feeling that would come with the bells. I invite you into presence. You might want to put your gaze kind of down at an angle, kind of pick a spot there, looking forward and down. You might want to just close your eyes. I will probably close my eyes here. And what I want to invite you into right now is awareness of your body. I'm a minister, and I believe deeply in the ideal of an embodied theology. So often our theology is just up in our head, ideas and thoughts and concepts. I'm much more interested in an embodied spirituality, an embodied religion, an embodied theology. And with that, I invite you to breathe in and out. In and out. I invite you to be aware of your hands. I'm going to place my hands in my lap. I don't know if you could see my lap here. I guess not quite. So I move back a little bit. There you go. I'm going to put my hands in my lap right here. And I'm going to do a little mudra where I invite my index finger and my thumb to connect. So you might want to try that. And I invite you to just notice your in-breath and your out-breath. I invite you to just wiggle, whether you have socks on, shoes on, or barefoot. I invite you to wiggle your toes a little bit. We give so little attention to our feet, so little attention to our toes. These wonderful little appendages there, way down there. Just a little appreciation for our toes. And breathe in and out. I invite you to just notice your legs. Notice if there's any tightness, any stress, any tension in your legs. Your calves, your thighs, up into your hips and buttocks. I feel a little tension right now in my hips. I oftentimes am holding a little tension there. And I'm going to release that little mudra. I'm just going to have my hands open now. And I'm going to breathe all the way into my hips, whatever that means to you. Of course, I'm breathing just into my lungs, but that ideal of just breathing into my hips. Breathing in and out. Nice slow in-breath, in and out. And as you do that, I invite you to breathe into all four sides of your torso. Breathing in and out. You might notice that your back, your spine feels like it's starting to expand. You might start to feel a little space between your shoulders and your ears. Just let those shoulders drop, especially on that out breath. In and out. we wiggled those fingers. We wiggled those toes. Now let's wiggle those fingers a little bit. Just bringing awareness to the body. And now imagine as you breathe out, imagine that breath going all the way up your spine, up your neck, and out through the top of your head. Let's breathe all the way down, past our gut, into our hips, and then all the way up through our neck and up through the top of our heads. Let's try that. And again, we're just imagining here. Breathing in and out. Breathing deeply and slowly. You might imagine the breath flowing down one side of your spine and then up the other side. In and out. One more time on that same side. In looping around your tailbone and then out. Now imagine the breath going the other direction. Breathing in on the right side of my spine. Looping around the tailbone and up and out. In and out. One last time. In and out. Just have a moment here of silence. We create such little space for silence. If you read the Bible, if you read the New Testament, you'll hear story again and again of Jesus going off by himself into the wilderness, going off into the mountain, going off for that alone time. And it's almost as if that's his rejuvenation space. And we, of course, need the same thing. We need that rejuvenation. So in this world of constant, continuous noise, just a barrage of sounds at us, we have the earbuds in, we have the radio on, the news is on, we're scrolling through this or that. And where's the space for silence? Where's the space for silence? So that's one of the things that I want and try to build in with Fresh Green Blessings is that space for silence. I'm going to read now Psalm 124. It's a short one. And if you're out there and you want to say hello or say where you're at, you're welcome to share that in the chat. And of course, some of you may be watching this later. I know there are certain folks who seldom catch it live, but will oftentimes let us know when they see it later, which is also lovely. So I will begin with Psalm 124, and I'm going to read two different versions. I'm going to read from the New Revised Standard Version, and then I'm going to read from the King James Version. Slightly different. The King James, the older language. I love the old language of King James. So I'm going to read these through just nice and slowly. And again, just like with the bell, we're invited to enjoy. Psalm 124. Thanksgiving for Israel's deliverance. A song of ascents of David. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, I'm going to stop because I just realized something. I can't remember if I mentioned this just now. We had technical difficulties last time, so we were on the same psalm in the same chapter. So we're just going to go with that and just push everything back one more week. You may have tried to catch, and we had like 15 minutes and we got cut off. So we're going with Psalm 124 and Mark chapter 2 again. And just to get myself centered, I'll invite the bell to sound. And it's an invitation for you to get centered as well. Try not to think too much about the words to the psalm. Psalms tend to be prayerful. Sometimes they're songs of thanksgiving. We have a bit of that here. Sometimes they're songs of longing or even torment. And just let the words wash over you. Try not to bring too much thought to it. If you do bring thought to it, no worries, but just let the words wash over you. Psalm 124, Thanksgiving for Israel's deliverance, a song of ascents of David. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side when our enemies attacked us, then they would have swallowed us up alive. When their anger was kindled against us, then the flood would have swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Then over us would have gone the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord, who has not given us as prey to their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. I think we're at such a challenging time. It's late February 2025. And Israel, as we know it today, is very much a superpower. Great military might, nuclear weapons, and of course, we're all aware of how Israel was attacked and then how Israel has attacked Gaza and how many civilian lives, my gosh, how many have been lost. And I think it's almost adds another layer of challenge for us in terms of wrestling with the Bible. Because when we hear Israel today, we're thinking Israel as in the news, what's happening in Gaza. And we're not thinking of this small band of people with very little power who we're reading about here. We're not thinking of them as this group that is deeply oppressed, that is suffering greatly under the powers of others and finding strength through the Lord. There's a mode of Bible study, the critical historical method, which focuses on, hey, let's look at the context. Let's look at the time when this happened. And oftentimes I'm resistant to that. It can become too heady for me. It can be caught up in historical markers and move away from the heart of the teachings. But here it might be of value. It might be of value to remember that we're talking about a different time and a different era. So I just put that out there. And I think one of the things that happens with the Bible is that it's a bit of work to pull back the layers and touch the sacred, touch the sacrality of this text. And my goodness, I believe it's worthy work. That's why I'm sitting here with you. But it is also the challenge of the times we're in and how that relates to what we're reading. And maybe that's part of the work too. I mean, that is definitely part of the work as well. Like, how do we reconcile that, right? Psalm 124, once again, the King James Version. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, then they had swallowed us up quick, when their wrath was kindled against us. Then the waters had overwhelmed us, the stream had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord, who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. When I read this and it speaks of the waters overwhelming them, the waters going over their soul, I think of the story of the Exodus, right? Where Moses leads the people through the Red Sea and the waters do not overcome them. The waters part for them. And the waters, as we'll see when we're talking about the New Testament as well, waters also represent the chaos. And so this chaos that can overwhelm, right? And so the thing that, beyond the stuff I was saying in terms of Israel and that, the thing that is also a challenge for so many people today, and I think this is especially people who identify themselves as spiritual but not religious, is the zeitgeist of these times is this: the spirituality is within us. And so we don't look external to us. I agree that spirituality is within us, that we need to turn within to touch and find the sacred, as well as in nature. But I think we do ourselves a disservice by saying, oh, no other turning outside of myself for the sacred. It's almost as if we have this need to pathologize that. It's almost as if we have this idea that we have to have this one way. There's this dichotomous black and white thinking that happens again and again throughout our lives. The way we think about so many things, certainly the way we think about politics, but the way we think about religion, the way we think about spirituality, there's this way, the right way, and then there's the wrong way. It can be a great resource to open to the sacred outside of us. That need not be a denial of the sacred within. It was interesting. I have this set of Bible commentaries, 12 volumes from the 1950s. And this one, written in 1955, I believe it was. In the commentary on Psalm 124, this exposition written by Frank Ballard. He's a Brit, and he writes of Winston Churchill. And I don't know that much about Churchill. I've seen one or two films, but I think of Churchill as kind of pragmatic and practical. And he talks about, he says, in generally, with Churchill, you get a straightforward statement of facts, but now and again, there's a suggestion of deeper thought. And he goes way back to when Churchill was a war correspondent in Africa. And he was in a position where he didn't know if he was going to make it out of there alive. And he says, this is Churchill's own words. I realized with awful force that no exercise of my own feeble wit and strength could save me from my enemies, and that without the assistance of that high power, which interferes in the eternal sequence of causes and effects more often than we are always prone to admit, I could never succeed. I prayed long and earnestly for help and guidance, and my prayers, it seems to me, was swiftly and wonderfully answered. Here we have one of the primary movers and shakers of World War II for the Allied forces. And he certainly goes internal, right? He goes and what we must do. But he also has this sense of something greater. One of his friends quotes Churchill speaking about during World War I, and an escape in France, where Churchill said, I had a strong sensation that a hand had been stretched out to move me in the nick of time from a fatal spot. Most of our ancestors thought like that. And Churchill maybe doesn't admit that kind of thinking much, but it's there in print, where however we think of this great mystery, this great sacred, the Holy of Holies, God, whatever words we want to use, this idea that there is this greater force, and that it is not just the clockmaker, but it is active. And certainly the people in the Psalms, again and again, the psalmists call upon that. And I think we think of it as childish sometimes to do the same. And I wonder, if it may just be our egos are so big sometimes that we feel that we're so in charge that we can't allow for these forces, this energy, this intelligence greater than ourselves at play and at work in the world. No one should force himself, I don't think, one way or the other on this, but I do invite us, if you don't have that perspective, that's fine. But I guess what I'll ask is, do we need to be dismissive of that perspective? Do we need to be cynical about that view? Or maybe are things way more complex than we understand? In Buddhism, they speak of suffering and non-suffering, a path to suffering, a path to non-suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths. And here we're seeing in Judeo-Christian tradition this idea of Part of the path to non-suffering is calling on the sacred. One of the things we do in Fresh Green Blessings is what's called Lectio Divinae, reading poetically, reading prayerfully, and with a certain intuitiveness, with a certain extemporaneously, just sort of letting it flow, letting the words flow out as they flow out. Improv, biblical improv. And so I'm going to do a little biblical improv, sacred biblical improv, also known as Lectio Divinae, with Psalm 124, and we'll see where it goes. I think I'll use the New Revised Standard Version. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let us say, the Lord on our side. When anger kindled against us, the Lord on our side. When torrents would come over us, the Lord on our side. When we are caught in a snare, the Lord on our side. Raging waters over us, the Lord on our side. Enemies attacking us, the Lord on our side. Others ready to swallow us alive, the Lord on our side. Pray to their teeth, the Lord on our side. Caught in traps we did not see, the Lord on our side. Fearful, angry, scared, the Lord by our side. Help by our side. Heaven and earth by our side. A song to the Lord. By our side. By our side. By our side. It's sometimes too big. The pain, the suffering, the confusion, the despair, the angst, the overwhelm. What of you? What of you to say that the creator of all this massive, unknowable, incomprehensible, unnameable something is yet so personal, so near, so close. By our side. By our side. By your side. By my side. By my side. By your side. By our side. By your side. By my side. By our 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 side. With us. With us. With you. With you. Right now. With you right now. With you right now by your side. With you right now at your side. With you now at your side. Always at your side. Always at your side. Always. 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 Always at your side. Usually between our Hebrew Bible and New Testament reading, we have get up and have a little stretch, and we'll do that today. I'm having some shoulder issues with this one arm, so we'll just do a little shoulder roll here to help ourselves out. I invite you to roll those shoulders up and back, up and back, up and back, up and back. And now the other direction, back and up, back and up, back and up, back and up. I'm going to invite you to turn your head to the right. Get a nice stretch there. Keep your hips facing the front, but go ahead and turn. And then breathing back to the left. and back. And now I invite you to put your your right ear towards your right shoulder. And you put your hand, don't push down, but just a gentle hand on your head. Feel that nice stretch in your left shoulder. And now back up. And out to the other side, left shoulder to left ear, and a nice stretch. Do a little wider rolls here. I'm going to step back here a little bit away from the candle. I'm having trouble in this left shoulder, so I'm not going to move it all the way around, but just a little bit. Opening that up a little bit. Open it up a little bit. And now maybe just swinging a little bit back and forth. This is sometimes called knocking on heaven's door. Just a little swing back and forth. Just let your arms kind of hang down. Let them kind of fly. Let them swing, if you will. And you can pick up the pace a little bit. And you can sync it up with your breath. Very good, very good. Now I'm going to put a hand on the bed here to help me with balance. And if you want, you can lift that one leg up and then bring it back. Grab your right ankle with your right hand and just, again, stretch it out. If you're tightening in your toes, loosen your toes, wiggle your toes a little bit. There we go. And then you can bring that up front and then back and stretch again. I'm getting a nice stretch there in the front thigh muscle of my right leg. And you can kind of lift your chest up, shoulders back and up. And I'll do that a little bit with the other leg. I'll do this sideways. I'll put a hand here to sort of help me with balance. And lift this left leg up and then back. And a nice stretch there on that leg. That feels really nice. Again, we are embodied beings. We might have thoughts and ideas, but we're also muscle, blood, bone, sinew. Very good. Couple more rolls this way. Put those hands together. Nice little warmth going between them. Nice warmth. And then place your hands on your chest. We'll now move into, I have to move my camera here. We'll now move into Mark chapter 2. And what I typically do is I pick out a particular verse or a particular little section and then share that. So I'm going to share from Mark chapter 2, and we'll start with the King James this time. And this is chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. And Jesus went forth again by the seaside, and all the multitude resorted unto him, and he taught them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the receipt of custom, and said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. And it came to pass that as Jesus sat at meal in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many, and they followed him. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eat with publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? When Jesus heard it, he saith unto them, They that are whole have no need of the physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And now, the New Revised Standard Version, Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. Jesus went out again beside the sea. The whole crowd gathered around him, and he taught them. As he was walking along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were also sitting with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I've come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Finally, when we get to the New Testament, we have not just the New Revised Standard Version and the King James Version, but we also have a new translation by Sarah Rudin of the Gospels. And so I will also read her translation of Mark chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. Then Iesus went out again to the sea, and the whole crowd came to him, and he started to teach them. Then as he was passing along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And it happened that Iesus was reclining at the table in Levi's house, and many tax collectors and other wrongdoers were reclining with Iesus and his students. There were, in fact, many of them, and they were following him. And when the scholars who were Pharisai saw that he was eating with wrongdoers, including tax collectors, they said to his students, "He eats with wrongdoers, including tax collectors." But Iesus, hearing this, said to them, "People who are strong and healthy don't have any need for a doctor. No, it's those who are unwell. I didn't come to call upright people, but wrongdoers instead." This story of the visit to Levi's home is a familiar one, and most of us who are familiar with Christian tradition know it. And there's versions of it found in Matthew chapter 9 and Luke chapter 5 as well. And one of the problems that we run into is that we hear these stories again and again, and it becomes like, yeah, it's cool. He's there with the bad guys. And a little bit more background, the tax collectors were oftentimes known to be corrupt. And so they're really abusing their position. They're, taking extra money and all this sort of stuff. So they're really seen as sinners, if you will. And in this, again, the Interpreter's Bible, and this was written in the 50s. This particular book on Mark, written in 1951. Halfred Lukács writes, and I share this because I just thought, wow, this is so good in terms of We hear these stories. Oh, yeah, yeah, he's there with the sinners, da 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 da. And I also think, and this is part of my own biases or whatever. I think of like, oh my gosh, in the 50s, so many people at the churches. Now the churches are all seem to be dying, et cetera, et cetera. And so I sort of have this longing for this other time, even though I know there were so many problems in the 50s, right? But I'm thinking, oh, well, people, at least they had a sense of the sacred. But this is interesting what Lukács writes. What would we think of the crew of a life-saving station who gave all their attention to the station itself, made the quarters attractive, planted gardens, designed uniforms, provided music, and thus pleasantly occupied, shut out the roar of pounding breakers, driving ships and men to destruction on the rocks? Incredible, we would say. And rightly. Yet is such a fancy far removed from a church, so intent on its own interior life, its housing, its decorations, its material well-being, rather than the plight of those outside. How many churches, just at the time when the needs around them were growing greater, have packed up and followed the righteous out to a new location in a pleasant residential section where peace, perfect peace reigns. In some such fashion, we can get away from the disturbing cries and burdens of sin and need. But there is a price to be paid for it. We also get far away from him who came to save sinners. I think we all get caught in ideas of what church is or what church should be. I remember a couple of years ago visiting a church right here in Columbus, and I was impressed. They had comfy seats in the back, reclining chairs, and mostly in them were people, it seemed, who were homeless or near homeless, but who were connected to that church. I found that they were certainly breaking out of some sort of mold. I also find it interesting, this idea that it's not just for the righteous, that we can find parallels in Buddhist tradition. And I'd like to share today from a wonderful book called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, pages 126 and 127. I'll invite the bell to sound here before I show this. I should say about, I think I have a copy of it right here. Yep. Here's a copy of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. The author of it, Sogyo Rinpoche, He had many problems himself. He's he's passed on now, but he definitely abused his position in some awful ways. Very sad. Yet at the same time, in this book, there are some great teachings. And I suppose another time I'll talk about that. Can we separate sometimes the teacher from the teaching? Here's a story from this book, page 126, 127. Dujom Rinpoche used to tell the story of a powerful bandit in India who, after countless successful raids, realized the terrible suffering he had been causing. He yearned for some way of atoning for what he had done and visited a famous master. He asked him, "I'm a sinner. I'm in torment. What's the way out? What can I do?" The master looked the bandit up and down and then asked him what he was good at. "Nothing," replied the bandit. "Nothing?" barked the master. "You must be good at something." The bandit was silent for a while and eventually admitted, "Actually, there's one thing I have a talent for, and that's stealing." The master chuckled. "Good. That's exactly the skill you'll need now. Go to a quiet place and rob all your perceptions and steal all the stars and planets in the sky and dissolve them into the belly of emptiness, the all-encompassing space of the nature of mind." Within 21 days, the bandit had realized the nature of his mind and eventually came to be regarded as one of the great saints of India. We have these stories of the sinners and people who, more than robbery, people are murderers, and how they become leaders in Buddhist or Christian tradition. Paul was persecuting Christians before he had his conversion experience on the road to Damascus. Milarepa is another one in Buddhist tradition who, again, transforms and becomes a different kind of person. And I think that's always the message. And it's one that we give lip service to, but the idea, the possibility of transformation, the idea that no matter who you are, you have the Buddha nature within you. No matter what you've done, you are actually a child of God. I'll read again from Mark, chapter 2. And when Jesus goes, it begins, went out again beside the sea. We might think of the sea again as chaos. And the chaos even of this tax collector who's doing great wrong, Levi. And after the Pharisees make their accusation, what's he doing eating and drinking with these sinners and evildoers, these tax collectors? Jesus responds, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I've come to call not the righteous, but sinners. I invite you into a space of prayer. O Great Spirit, we are aware of our imperfections. We are aware of how often our hearts are unkind, how often we are selfish, how often we are careless, how little attention we give to those in need. I'll speak for myself here. I know that I can sometimes be ego-driven. I know that I can sometimes be ugly in my thoughts, unkind, mean, even if I don't express them, self-centered. Pretending that this world evolves all around me. The Pharisees and scribes and many church leaders of today, I'm afraid, would say you should be outside of the good people. You're not good enough. You're not kind enough. You're not righteous enough. Help us, Great Spirit, to be humble. Levi knew he was doing wrong, and he also recognized the call, follow me. And he responded. Help us to respond. Help us to not beat ourselves up for being imperfect beings. As we fall off the path, as we fail with loved ones, with neighbors, with strangers, with acquaintances, with friends, every time we fail, help us to try again, to move closer toward being what we truly are. Sons and daughters of God, bodhisattvas in training, spirit beings who are here to learn and grow. Help us give ourselves a space to forgive ourselves for the little mistakes and the big ones, and to help us to do our best to rectify what we can and to add the good where we can. And to keep growing, keep learning, keep trying. As the psalmist said, help us to recognize that you are here to help us, as we also work to help ourselves. Help us to work hand in hand. May we add to the good within ourselves, within our friends and neighbors and families, within our communities, within our country, within our world, and beyond. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Peace and amen and amen. Thank you for joining us today. I hope this Bible study has value for you. Maybe you get a little sense of what we're trying to do, this melding of different traditions, this trying to open our hearts, allowing these ancient teachings to work on us and work within us. May the great sacred be with you, with me, with us all. May we continue to try our best to water beneficial seeds. We will not be here next Wednesday. Ash Wednesday, we'll have a special 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. service. You're welcome to join us. It'll be right here on YouTube. And if you want to know more about us, you can go to theholynow.org, and you can certainly sign up there for our email list and also look at our calendar for other programs that are upcoming. We'll be gathering for Wild Church here on Sunday in Central Ohio if you happen to be in the Central Ohio area.